Hi everyone, this is Angie Wong and I'm president of Legacy PAC. I just want to thank all of our followers. We're close to 100,000 followers on Facebook and we've only been around for a few short months. So thank you again. I'm going to ask you for your continued support leading up to 2024. Please donate to legacy-pac.org. That's legacy-pac.org. Thank you, and we'll see you on the campaign trail.
I'm Jared Craig with Event Voice, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Mike Donnelly, who is a veteran. He is interested in the public education system of our children's futures, and he has a rich history, a broad history, contacts with the homeschool movement that's going on in the United States. He is a network of different organizations he's worked with. He's a published author, and he's written many articles about some very interesting topics. He's also an attorney who holds membership in 6 different state and federal bars. So, Mike, welcome to the show, and introduce yourself. Tell us first off, how did you get so involved in so many things?
Jared, it's great to be with you and great to be talking to my fellow veteran audience and anyone else who is listening here. It's been a number of years since I served, but I remember my time of service very fondly, and it was an honor to serve this great country that we live in. And I'm excited to talk about education and how what I'm doing may help in some small way to affect the future of our country, because I think that education is critically important. I think a lot of people think that when you look around at what's happening in our country today, education is a big topic. And and your question is, how did I get involved in so many things? I think you'd have to ask my mom. She could probably give you the best answer, because I don't think I was diagnosed with ADHD, but I think I have it. Whatever it is, I'm not actually sure what that is. I think it's like normal for some people to go from this to this to this to this. And that's just the way I am. I have lots of interests and I'm very energetic and I like to do lots of different things. So, something is interesting to me, I do it. I coach soccer. I'm involved in my church. I'm busy with organization here. Yes, Every Kid. I teach constitutional law, international law for different colleges and universities. And I don't know. God made me this way. Don't ask me, ask him.
Well, that's the definition. I might have a bit of that myself, because I think that I'm also a trial attorney and academic to some degree with that. And I think that's a trait that a lot of people in the practice of law have, is because it's such a flexible opportunity. You can do a lot of different things with it. And not to talk about myself, but I've handled every kind of case from an adoption to kidnapping and almost everything in between.
So, and just by way of introduction, I think I really need to just set the stage a little bit more, because I'm a homeschooling parent. I've been married for 30 years to my wife, Patricia, who's amazing, supports me and our family. She's a homeschooling mom. So those are probably the most important things about me that you need to know.
And what branch of the military did you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So getting back to the Army, my service in the military is very interesting, how I got started and then how I moved into my active duty service. So my first contact with the military was my buddies in high school saying to me, "Hey, Mike, we're going to join the National Guard. You should too." I'm like, I'm a junior in high school. And I'm like, what's the National Guard?
All right.
And they're like, "Yeah,
that sounds like fun if your friends are all going."
Yeah, well, so it was this whole National Guard program back. It was in 1984, and I'm like, "Well, that sounds interesting." I didn't have a summer job lined up, and I was looking for a way to make some money. And they're like, "Yeah, we get to shoot guns. This is going to be great. You should do it." I'm like, "All right, let's talk to the recruiter." So the recruiter sold my mom on it. I just turned 17, went to basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And I was off into a mountain infantry unit as a combat medic. I went to Fort Sam, Houston, to do my advanced training right before I went to college. So I was in the Army for my senior year of high school, which was cool. And yeah, so that's how I got started in the military.
Okay.
Then, I went to Boston University for my undergraduate program, and somehow, and I still don't know quite how to this day how the guy found me, but there was a recruiter who'd heard about me, and being prior military, he's thinking he's shooting fish in a barrel here, right? Because he can offer me money and I don't have to do the first 2 years. I was already a sophomore in college. He's like, dude, you need to be an ROTC cadet. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he explained the program. He said, and we'll help you pay for college. I'm like, that sounds really good, because I grew up poor. I was taking out a lot of loans, and I'm like, that sounds like a good option.
Not the loan forgiveness program, not the loan forgiveness program that Biden's been trying to float, right?
I know, right? And I didn't even get 100% scholarship. I was still having to borrow money to pay for the rest of my college at this very expensive private college. But anyway, went in as an ROTC cadet at Boston University. And I'll tell you, when I went to what they did in those days, advanced camp. I'm sure there's some guys here who some former officers who did the advanced camp. I'm not sure if they do that anymore. But anyway, this was at, where was this? Fort Bragg. This was at Fort Bragg. And they roll out all the different branches on display. And when I got on the M1A1 tank, I said, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I realized, so I got involved with armor, and I ended up being in the cavalry. And that's where I did my active duty time, was in the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment from 1989 to 1994.
For the military, I'm an advocate, and
Gotcha.
I have been advocating for, as an attorney's role, for veterans' rights and promoting candidates that are voting and presenting legislation for veterans' rights. But I'm not a veteran myself, just to clarify that. So thank you for your service. I can imagine driving tanks. There was a company in Las Vegas that I saw advertising where you can go out there in your free time and drive those tanks around, in case you wanted another experience with that. But I don't think that they load them with the artillery shells completely. So,
well, Jared, let me tell you something. I got to serve with the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment as a tank platoon leader. And we served in Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and we served under Norman Schwarzkopf. I was part of the 18th Airborne Corps' envelopment over in Iraq, and it was a privilege and an honor to serve, this country in wartime. And I'll tell you, there's not a whole lot more that is more fun, I would say, than riding a M1A1 tank at 60, 70 miles an hour in the desert, shooting service ammunition, high explosive rounds. And, it was serious business. We were there for a serious mission, which we accomplished. But, you might as well have fun while you're doing stuff. And we had some fun while we were there, even though we were, it was a war. Anyway, appreciated that. And appreciate all the men I served with. Amazing soldiers, great leaders in the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment in G Troop.
And did you have a family while you were also active military, or is that a little further down the storyline?
It's a great. So my wife and I met when we were in high school, and
Okay.
we were not together when I was in the military. But right after I got back, we wrote letters. We've saved letters. I got 200 letters, because back in those days you wrote letters, right?
That's vintage texting, is what I hear that's called.
We wrote letters back and forth the old-fashioned way, and when we got back, we decided to make it permanent. So we got married right after I got back from the war, and we've been married for 30 years.
Okay, good. I'm coming up on my 20th anniversary here, if we make it to May, but I'm just teasing. So when do you still have school-age children, or have they aged out?
No, so my wife and I have 7 kids, age 12 to 25, that we have homeschooled pretty much all the way through. 3 of them have graduated from college. 1 is in college. We still have 3 at home.
Okay, and what I'm kind of getting to is you're currently involved with Yes Every Kid Foundation, and you're currently active in promoting alternative, family first, homeschool networking that wasn't really available when we were coming up in school, or the homeschooling is night and day from what it used to be, is another way to put it. So tell us about what Yes Every Kid Foundation is doing, if you have any upcoming events, or how people could get involved with that if they wanted to participate in the process, or just tell us about what you're doing.
Yes Every Kid is dedicated to unlocking the extraordinary potential that exists in every child. And I served the Homeschool Legal Defense Association for about 17 years before joining Yes Every Kid. I'm pretty new here at the Yes Every Kid Foundation, but our mission is to shift the way people think about education. We have a top-down standardization, industrialized kind of system that isn't really working very well for a lot of kids. They go in and they're expected to do the same thing that everybody else does, and it's really not about them, it's about the system, unfortunately. And so our vision is to apply some principles that we believe are important, principles like dignity and bottoms up. Like the solution to problems in our country should be, we should solve problems closest to where the problem is, right? The people who are closest to the problem know what the solution should be. So we need to try to have those kinds of solutions that are bottom up. And we need to have an education system, we believe, that focuses on children, because every child is different. Every child is unique. I mean, you have kids, I've got 7, we've homeschooled them. I mean, they're all different. They all have different talents, abilities. I believe in God. I believe that God has made every child different, and they have a unique purpose for their life. And we need to have an education system, an education environment, because I don't think we need to have a system. I don't think systems treat people very well. We got to have systems to do certain things, but do we have to have an education system? I'm not sure. What we do need to have, though, is an educational environment and an approach to education in our country that treats kids as individuals, that respects families, that trusts our fellow citizens and the parents of those kids to make the best decision for that child. And we need to have policies, Jared, that reflect those values, right? And we don't right now. We do not. We have a system that was conceived back in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution, when the elites just wanted factory workers, and they wanted to control the population, and we're going to tell them what to think and how to think. And this is a new this is a new age, right? We have technology. We think differently about how people can be treated, right? We want to treat people as individuals more these days, and people want to be treated as individuals. And when you think about it, Jared, that is what our country was founded on. It was founded on the idea of individual rights, Declaration of Independence.
One thing I was thinking about that kind of distilled since you were talking was, it seems as though the education system that my kids are in, that many people's children are in, it's motivated by a negative reinforcement. It's you step in line, you follow toe the line, do what you're told, cookie cutter outcome. The procedure for the teachers isn't, or sort of the product of the teachers is not educating the students, is covering their administrative liabilities with their higher ups, versus how I understand the homeschooling is more of a positive reinforcement based upon the individual needs, abilities, and interests of the child. And I talked with a good friend of mine in the basement. We solve all the problems in the game room, and we talk about education. Where does education start? It should start with the family. The history of education started with what your family did as a trade. I'm going way back in time, and how you had the generational wisdom within that trade from one to the next generation, on and on and on. And what we're finding is in this education system is that they're trying to devalue that generational wisdom. They want parents to defer all education to a system of, I would call it, generally disinterested teachers who have a snapshot, maybe one full year of your child's life, or one school year, which isn't a whole calendar year. And we're told to defer to them for now morals, principles, manners, and social norms. And look at what they're trying to do. They're getting rid of all principles, ethics, creeds, and they want to create a homogeneous group of children with no principles. And it's refreshing to see people like yourself and your organization to be stepping up and fighting against the momentum of the government system. And you
That's
hit the
right.
nail on the head. This is a country of individuals with individual rights. And that mirrors the modern sense of Christianity, individual salvation,
That's
not
right.
a collectivism, that you don't go with a gaggle of your closest church deacons to the pearly gates and argue your salvation. It's you on your own with your own rights and responsibilities. So the Yes Every Kid Foundation, do you have some current movements that are going on? Do you have
Yeah.
what are some, I guess, current events with that foundation?
Well, so Yes Every Kid is dedicated to policies and figuring out ways that we can unlock these new ways of doing education. And so we were working actively in policy, and you may have heard in the news in states like Arkansas or Iowa, Utah, Florida, they are looking at creating policies that allow parents more choices by giving them the opportunity to direct funding, right? Giving them opportunities to apply for and receive funding that will open up opportunities for their kids. And you talk about public schools, Jared, and there are a lot of there are some teachers in there that may be disinterested, but I think by and large, teachers are motivated by a desire to help kids. That's what they want to do. That's why they got into the teaching profession. The problem is the teaching systems, the whole professionalization of it, the standardization of it gets in the way of what these teachers want to do. And so there are things that we can do in the public schools to make them better, trying to require that public schools accept people no matter where they live. For example, you may have heard of why should your zip code determine what school you go to? It shouldn't. If we're going to have public schools, everybody should be able to go to them. I mean, that has implications for how we fund them and the laws that we have. So I think, there's something there, but Jared, let me tell you, there's something really exciting happening in education. There is this whole new breed of individuals that they're kind of like homeschooling parents, but they're not quite, because we homeschooling parents, we're not isolated. That's kind of an old stereotype. We get together, but there's this new breed of people who are like, I'm not sure that I feel like I can do the homeschooling route, but I want something different than this institutional one size fits all kind of government run system. And there's this new breed of people who are starting these educational ventures, these education entrepreneurs is what I like to call them, who are starting things like learning pods and micro schools and learning collaboratives. And they're doing it in so many different ways. And they're bringing, a few families together, maybe 20 families together. And it's kind of like a mini school, but it's very different. It's not institutionalized, it's not standardized. It's focused on treating kids as individuals. And there's lots of different ways you can do it with lots of different curriculum. And as you said before, education really should start at the family. And so what these educational entrepreneurs are doing is they're going, what do you families want? What do you want for your children? And they are thinking about and operating to serve those families. And so at Yes, what we're trying to do is serve those people. That's one of my goals, is to try to help these education entrepreneurs figure out how to overcome the regulatory hurdles that they have to face. And, and there are a lot. There's a lot. We make it difficult, unfortunately, in our states and country and at the federal government level for people to innovate. And we've got to do something about that. And that's what we want to do, is we want to intervene. We want to encourage these people. We want to inspire these people. We want to support these people, both in the public schools and these new entrepreneurs and homeschoolers too, to be able to have a boundaryless educational environment where their kids and they can figure it out for themselves, where we trust them and say, these are our fellow citizens. We won our independence from Great Britain by working together, right?
Right.
We don't need the federal government stepping in like the new king, telling us what to do, or even our state governments, frankly, telling us what to do and how to do it. They need to just back off, go away, leave us alone. That's what we want.
The parents.
That's exactly
what
empower
the parents for the benefit of the children feel empowered.
That's right.
And I'm not sure your firm handles people fresh out of law school. But one thing that I'm seeing is when people coming out of law school, coming for a job or coming for an interview for a job, or, maybe they're just coming for an interview to see how an interview works because they've never done that. Critical thinking is gone. Mm-hmm. We teach our kids, they first learn to read and then they read to learn. And then the next module is every bit of information that you're given, you have to incorporate it, synthesize it, and then use it. At that point, you have a more rich knowledge base. You have the wisdom of multiple generations given to you. but that requires critical thinking. And not every bit of all the knowledge you're exposed to at any level is accurate. The critical thinking is what allows you to educate yourself after being exposed and introduced to a certain amount of information. So I am all on board with what you're doing. I think it's a great thing, because if we just keep our heads down and let any governmental system handle something, it goes too far in the wrong direction before we can pull it back. The boiled frog metaphor comes to mind. And we have, I think, a duty to our children to give them the best opportunity to stand out. If the majority of kids that are going to public school are going to be factory workers, they're going to be assembly line workers. Well, first off, we don't manufacture anything really here. Well, we should, but we don't. And we need to have our kids stand out as possibly the entrepreneurs. The next level of people are not rote learning recipients. So I think that your foundation is very well placed at a great time, and I'm sure you're dodging slings and arrows from the hardcore school boards and the various voucher systems trying to fight over all the red tape that they're trying to pull in front of you at every angle, because they depend on that system.
Here's how I see what's happening, right? We need to understand where we are in the arc of history. Okay. And I just want you to know, fellow veterans,
you have to teach history first.
we need to understand history so you can understand where you're at in the arc of history, right? And I'm not a historian, but I've studied the history of education and education.
Right.
And I'm not a prophet, but I do believe that there is good reason to be optimistic. I believe Ronald Reagan was one of my favorite presidents. Okay. And he said, America's best days are ahead of us. And I still think that is true. It's easy to look around and get discouraged. And when you look at what's happening in the education system and in our society, it's easy to get discouraged. But my friends, let me just tell you something. We are in the midst of a revolutionary transformation. It's happening. And if you look at the way things used to be, they're moving in a different direction. And that includes education. And for me, that's critical, because education is a very big determining factor of the future of our society. Okay. The homeschooling movement started about 40, 50 years ago. Okay. And it's growing. People are not getting more interested in standardized and industrialized top-down education. They're getting less interested in that. They're looking for different alternatives. We should be very encouraged by that. Our fellow citizens realize there's a problem, and they're looking for different solutions, and they're stepping up to provide those solutions in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different areas. So I'm very encouraged, and I think we are, education in a generation from now is going to look radically different than it looks today. And that encourages me, because I see the direction is positive, not negative, even though there are a lot of problems. Believe me, I'm not going to sweep the problems under the rug. Okay. Parents are going after school boards, are taking over school boards, but we should see that as a positive. Right? Yes, there are negative things, but people are doing something about it. So be encouraged.
The value of the public education has dropped. It's been eroded. And I always want to go back to Reagan. Also, my favorite quote is, if the government is the answer, it must have been a really stupid question. But that kind of leads us into the next topic that I was looking to get into, was the Concerned Veterans for America and your connection with the Team Trump and the all of your more recent political activity that's been going on. What the network that you're working with has been doing, and your history working with Team Trump, or alongside or nearby the Team Trump.
Well, so you go back to 2015, 2016. I mean, I have to admit, I was a Cruz guy. Okay. I was a very strong supporter of Ted Cruz, but I very quickly became an active and strong advocate for President Trump, who I was very happy was elected. And I'm upset about what happened in 2020, and we don't have to go into any great detail. I'm sure there's a lot of people who were upset about what happened. And I think there's some steps that have been taken to make things better, but we really need to work hard to make changes to ensure that there is integrity in our election system. Okay, I'll just put it that way. And so I've worked with people who worked with President Trump. For example, Jenna Ellis, who is a radio commentator. She was one of the senior counsels to President Trump, is a friend of mine. I'm on her board for election integrity, and I've been working to advance that idea as much as I can. And there's been some success in that area. And I'm, Yes Every Kid, where I'm focused on education and using my legal expertise, is is part of the Stand Together Network, which is a community of nonprofit organizations and initiatives and concerned veterans. Concerned Veterans for America is part of it. And I'm new to the network, so I'm learning a lot about it. But I'm excited because I love the principles that this network stands for. Things like dignity and for freedom and for people realizing their potential, right? And bottoms up solutions. Like those are the principles that the Stand Together Network believes should be applied in every area of our lives. So it's in government, in community, in business, in education. And when we create systems that are based on those values, everyone succeeds. Everyone has the best opportunity to succeed. And so that's what Concerned Veterans is doing, standing for freedom, advocating for policies that support those principles in America. And so, yeah, it's great. I mean, I encourage folks to look at CVA. I was not familiar with CVA until I became part recently of the Stand Together Network, but it looks like a good thing. And I've met some of the guys there, and they're very dedicated to veterans and giving a voice, just like what you're doing, Jared, giving a voice to veterans. And there's one thing that some of my fellow veterans might be interested in hearing about. One of the things that the Stand Together Network is doing is in the area of foreign policy. And they're advocating for this thing called realism and restraint. But this idea of realism and restraint, it's like we need to be realistic about America's role in the world and what we can actually do and what we should do, right? And that is
a lot of things that we shouldn't be doing. Yeah.
Well, exactly, right? So when you say what you should do, you really need to make sure you're focusing on the things that you shouldn't do. And that's a conversation that we really need to have in this country. And that's why I'm really very excited about what the Stand Together Foreign Policy Initiative, along with Concerned Veterans for America, is doing, is trying to speak into the defense industry, into Congress, this idea of being realistic and exercising restraint. We can't be, and we shouldn't be, the world's policeman. But we can't do that all the time. And we're spending so much money, and I believe in a strong military, right? But is it strong when you're sending all of our young men and women all over the place all the time to be a police force or to do humanitarian missions? That's not really the purpose of the American military. So that's what I appreciate about what our Stand Together initiative on foreign policy is doing, is trying to, I think they feel like they're a lone voice crying in the wilderness. Maybe you guys can work together to get Congress, to get our leadership to stop being so interventionist and so profligate in the way we are using and spending our treasure, and not just our monetary treasure, Jared, not just our monetary treasure, but the greatest treasure we have in our country, which is our people. These patriotic Americans who are signing up to serve our country, and then they're being sent out there to do all kinds of crazy things. We need to stop doing that.
Well, it sounds like your organization is doing what should be bipartisan. It should be common sense, and it should be universal principles, universal goals. And sadly enough, right now in our country, these simple common sense ideals are lost on either distracted youth who are being, I think, brainwashed by an education system, or otherwise are still in that phase of rebellion, which they are normally supposed to be a phase, not a lifestyle. And I think that what your organizations have been doing and what you've been doing personally is one of many things that we're going to be seeing change our next generation coming up. I have hope that our best days are in front of us also. I'm seeing the people coming out of high school actually rebelling against their older siblings. The millennials are now having to explain themselves to the new know-it-alls. I hate to put it that way, but fresh 18-year-olds, they're having a more conservative perspective of investigating what the world is to them. Because the millennial perspective and the liberal, I want to call it liberal agenda, it's not liberal, it's fascist, it's Marxist. that their perspective doesn't make sense. And I think there's two things happening here. Their next generation is making them second guess their principles, if you want to call them principles. And second of all, they're getting older and being more responsible, and they're finding out that they didn't really know what the heck they were talking about just a few years ago. So we're about to hit the time threshold. I don't want to edit this portion out, but was there anything that you wanted to plug, websites, social media plugs, or anything along those lines?
Sure.
And I'll just say go.
Jared, it's been great to be with you and to talk with my fellow veterans and my fellow Americans. You know, as you just said, I'm optimistic about the future, but we have a lot of hard work that we need to do to move our country in the right direction. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing. You should be encouraged, but that doesn't mean there isn't a lot of work to do. So we need to work together to do that. The Yes Every Kid Foundation and the Stand Together Network are working to advance a better future for our country based on these principles of dignity and openness and people realizing their full potential and having bottoms-up solutions, not top-down solutions. And you can learn more at the Yes Every Kid Foundation website. We're at yeseverykidfoundation.org. And if you do Twitter, you can find me on Twitter at yes_Donnelly. That's at yes_Donnelly. I don't tweet all the time, but that is one place where you can find me. So, Jared, thank you for what you're doing, serving and advocating for veterans and trying to speak common sense into our country. Thank you for that, and thank you for giving me a chance to talk with you and your audience today.
Mike, I appreciate you taking the time also. It's refreshing to see more and more people doing what no one else is doing, and finding out what needs to be done should be coupled with finding those who are willing to do it. And sadly enough, we're having to turn the Congress inside out to do so. And the Senate, I think we're learning more and more about who they actually are. So thank you very much. And I look to have you on the show again, maybe in the near future.
I'd love to come on again. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you.